So, you and I both play video games.
Of course.
I wouldn't say that I'm a hardcore gamer or anything like that by any means. I don't know if you would consider yourself one.
I have a spreadsheet where I track the progress of how many video games I've completed. Does that make me hardcore?
In some ways, different than I think some people would think, right? Like, I feel like some people's idea of a hardcore gamer is like, I play this one game constantly 20 hours a day. You know what I'm saying?
Cheetos on the fingers.
Right. But I think that in other people's definitions, you're definitely a hardcore gamer. And you're even more so than me. But I learned something this week about video games in general that kind of made me mad. It kind of made me upset. Okay? And get this. In 1998, there was a game that put a mini game during the loading screen of a video game. Excellent idea, because who wants to wait during a loading screen, right?
Right.
But they filed a patent. And so because of this patent, until 2015, when the patent expired, you were not allowed to put any, as they put it in the patent, quote, auxiliary games during the loading screen. And so here I am thinking, all the time I grew up, every game I ever played, especially the older systems you get, things load slowly when it comes to mechanical hard drives. And even before that, when they had to like load games off of cassette tapes and stuff like that, takes a long time. Here I am thinking that you can't have anything to do because that would take too much computing power or that wouldn't be possible to code. No, it's possible. There was just a patent someone wrote that prevents anyone else from doing it. So when I was addicted to Guitar Hero 1, 2, and 3, and I had to wait 2 minutes for every single song to load, I could have been piddling around in the menu playing a fun Guitar Hero minigame, but I wasn't allowed because someone made it legally impossible for me to do that. Does that make you mad?
Yeah, so I will admit I did know about this ahead of time.
Okay.
I remember hearing about it on a video game podcast, and yeah, I think about... There are so many like open world games that I'm thinking of like the Elder Scrolls series, where if you're playing that on on a bad old hard drive or an old console, it takes forever for all of that geometry and world to load.
Like minutes and minutes,
right?
For one load screen.
It's honestly part of the reason why I play a lot of PC games, or when I got into them when I did, was because it went incrementally faster,
right?
Because you didn't have to go get food while you were waiting to load back into the open world.
And with technology today, it's not near as big of a deal because there's background loading, and unless you're loading into a completely new environment or a completely new thing, it doesn't take that long. And even if it's a lot of data, things are just a lot quicker than they used to be.
Right.
And so maybe it was good for my brain that it wasn't constantly occupied with a mini game, but I feel like when I discovered that it was possible for such a thing to happen, it just made me upset that it didn't.
Welcome to the Factoid Podcast. You didn't ask for it, but we're going to tell you about it anyways. I'm Payton Gessel.
And I'm Chris Humphreys.
Chris, when we started recording our podcast, you were just getting ready to go into your Whole30.
Correct.
And I think it was the day before, so you were planning out your last meal, which, by the way, if you've ever been on the Wikipedia page for the last meals of death row prisoners, it is a wild ride, and I recommend you do it.
Okay.
But we're not talking about that today.
Okay.
I want to hear about how your Whole30 experience went, because you just finished it the other day.
Yes. So, it's, as a person who likes to eat and likes soda as much as I do. In fact, I talked about how I was drinking a Coke in one of the previous episodes. It was very difficult, and it's actually the second time I've done it, I said I would never do it again, but here we are. I did it again, and being completed, being through. It wasn't as hard the second time as it was the first time for me, but it was still very difficult, and the result, I do feel better. The results are good. I feel better. I feel good about myself. I don't drink as much soda, meaning I haven't had a soda in 35 days or whatever.
Right. What have you been doing to substitute for a soda?
So I've been drinking LaCroix or bubbly or carbonated water, which is not soda. Okay.
Correct.
It tastes like, I have a friend who says it just tastes like soda water that was sitting next to a fruit tree. That's kind of what it tastes like, right? It's just not, if you drink it really fast and don't think about it, the first sip tastes like soda, but it has a bad aftertaste. But you are allowed to drink kombucha, which is like fermented tea, as long as they didn't use sugar in the second fermentation process. Something about how fermentation works and the live thing. I don't exactly know how you make kombucha, but sugar is necessary in its creation. Like the thing, it's called a SCOBY.
Yes,
it like
I'm
eats
familiar with
sugar
the
to
SCOBY.
live.
Yeah, my brother-in-law, I think, got into it at one point and remember learning about his SCOBY.
Yeah, so it needs sugar in the fermentation, the first fermentation at minimum. As long as they don't use in the second one, you're allowed to drink it. And so there's a brand that does that, and it is the sweetest soda-iest thing you can have on Whole30. It's very expensive, and it still tastes like vinegar, like kind of like feet. It's not great, but it is good enough that I drank $40 worth of it over the last month.
Okay, well, I have a soda for you today that I think might make you want to wish you were back on Whole30.
Oh, no.
So you're obviously familiar with the Coke Freestyle machine. They've been around for a decade at this point, and very cool revolution of being able to add a little bit of complementary flavors into whatever drink you're getting, whether it's a little bit of lime in a Coke or different flavors of Fanta than you'd normally get. Did you know, by the way, that Pepsi has a competitor to the Coke Freestyle?
I didn't. I've never seen one.
It is just so rare, and it is in so few places that almost no one knows about it. I found like a subreddit where people were talking about this, and all. I think it was even a subreddit about soda, and most of the people there have never been able to find them.
I've never seen one, so that's interesting.
Yes. Once again, another tangent. Not talking about that today. But, you have the concept of the Coke Freestyle machine. And I'm sure as a kid, you probably mixed different sodas at the soda fountain.
Yeah.
Like, the term for it is a suicide.
Correct.
When you take like a couple ounces of each of them, you go down the row, you drink it. I have a very a fond memory of being at my local Fazoli's as a kid with my cousins, and we were making our own little concoctions of what if you take a little bit of this and mix it with that. Like, it's a pretty natural kid thing to do, and usually it doesn't taste that good. But what if you took the concept of a Coke Freestyle and you just kept going with it and just didn't stop? So, like, what if, say, you had a Coke with lime, but then you poured half and half on top of it? Or what if you had Mountain Dew and put birthday cake flavored syrup in it? Or a Sprite with strawberry boba in it?
Interesting.
I present to you the dirty soda.
The dirty soda.
Yes. So the dirty soda is a very unique phenomenon, and it is primarily based in Utah. And from the origins of it that I've been able to read, there are a few different events that led to this becoming what it is. And one of the origins says that it became very popular with stressed out moms.
Okay.
But no explanation beyond that, just stressed out moms. So what I feel to be like the main origin of the dirty soda just has to do with the state of Utah and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where 60% of Utah's population is part of the church. Often they're referred to as Mormons. And in one passage of their scriptures, there is a section that's referred to as the Word of Wisdom. And the Word of Wisdom gives a little bit of health advice about, how to live a healthy life and lifestyle. And in the Word of Wisdom, they talk about how that you should abstain from alcohol, tobacco, and something called hot drinks.
Hot drinks.
Hot drinks.
Okay.
And the definition of hot drinks has been disputed a lot since this was written about 200 years ago.
Okay.
Just a lot of different interpretations. And for the most part, everyone agrees that hot drinks includes coffee and it includes tea. But, soda wasn't invented in, when this was written in the early 1800s. John Pemberton or whatever his name is hadn't invented Coke until the late 1800s at this point. So you had plenty of people trying to say, is caffeine the problem? Because, if you think about things that coffee and tea both have, they both have caffeine.
Yes.
So there have been Mormons who have spoke with the Coca-Cola company. There have been relations over the years. And there wasn't a really hard, fast ruling by the church until 2012. There was an interview that was done, a TV special with several people in the Mormon church. And I think the church's official newsroom had a press release afterwards and said hey, this TV show did a great job of, talking about us, but here's a few things that they kind of got wrong. And one of the things that they said is they clarified that hot drinks is only coffee and tea. So right around 2012, Mormons were given about as official permission as they were going to get, that soda, caffeinated or not, is totally acceptable now.
Okay.
And right around this time, a new cottage industry of soda shops started opening up.
Exploded, I imagine.
Absolutely. Yes, they were shaken and exploded everywhere. And yeah, so right around this time, you have companies like Sodalicious, you have Fizz,
Okay.
you have Swig. Swig is the one that I've been reading a lot about. In 2017, Brigham Young University eventually started to follow suit with the initial ruling, and they allowed caffeinated drinks on campus as well. And from there, it just started to really take off because, your college kids are often the ones doing a lot of trendy things.
Right.
And from there, they have just enough disposable income and no one to tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing.
Right.
And, from a, perspective like that. So with this drink at their disposal, these soda shops started adding some extra mixers to the drinks. And I'm going to go to Swig's website here and their menu and just read off a few of these drinks. So we've got the Do Gooder, which is Mountain Dew, pineapple, lime, raspberry puree, coconut cream. You've got Buttery Beer, which is root beer, butterscotch, vanilla cream. It's like some of these honestly aren't that bad sounding.
That seems okay. Both those seem okay. I don't like coconut, but other than that, that sounds like a good drink.
Right. You've got the Shark Attack that has a Sprite lemonade, blue raspberry, and gummy sharks.
Okay.
Yes, a lot of these have garnishes, and sometimes they are, they are candy on top. Let's see here. I'm going to jump over to Fizz, when that is spelled F-I-I-Z for the listeners at home, if you're wanting to look up Fizz later. Fizz likes to put whipped cream on top of theirs as opposed to like a half and half or almost a creamer. So they have, let's see here. They have the G.I. Joe, which is Dr. Pepper and toasted marshmallow and whipped cream.
Huh.
Some of these have like gingerbread, several different purees. I don't know about you, but I hate root beer floats, and I think all this stuff sounds so gross. And I imagine there are some people that, think I'm probably making a bigger deal out of this than I am. But I would have never thought to put like dairy or something that's somewhat dairy into like a very acidic drink. I don't even know, like, does it mix? Does it curdle?
I don't know. I've seen like videos since TikTok is a thing.
Sure.
Like I've seen people mixing soda with stuff, which is probably the first time I've really seen it. And I love, up until 35 days ago, I drank 80 ounces a day, probably.
Same here.
Yeah, so
I have been drinking soda for the last 35 days, but I am also a big fan of soda.
Yeah. This does interest me, though, because I'm not a coffee drinker at all, or a tea drinker, really, unless sweet tea is considered tea, which is kind of is, but it's not really, I would be all for a soda shop that I can get, like, fancy soda drinks at.
Well, I'm glad you asked, Chris, because while we do live about 45 minutes away from the nearest soda shop from a Fizz, I have purchased all the ingredients to make dirty sodas, and Amy and Kirsten are going to be making them for us, and we'll be trying them here in a minute.
No way.
All right, Chris, what do you have in front of you here?
I have a dirty soda.
You sure do, and I have one as well. So I did a little bit of research on Swig's website, looked through something that was just enough out of my comfort zone, but not too far out. I landed on the Texas Tab, which is Dr. Pepper, vanilla, and coconut cream. And we also put some grenadine in there as well. Thought that might be fun. But the thing that scares me more than the dirty soda is that I've never drank Dr. Pepper before.
That cannot be real. You've never had Dr. Pepper.
There was a moment in grade school where I may have tried a sip, but I can't remember what it tasted like, and I might not have even done it.
Is there a reason that you haven't had Dr. Pepper?
I think I was just scared of a new thing, and when you're a little kid, you have 5 other.
But now, like until now, is there a reason that you've never tried it?
No, I've had other
never
ones.
Tried it.
It's probably not bad. Probably.
No, it's not bad. It's great. I'm a Coke drinker, right? Or in my previous life I was, right? 35 days ago, Chris was a Coke drinker. But like if I'm at a restaurant and they don't have Coke, I get Dr. Pepper because out of principle, because Coke, Pepsi, it's kind of a war, you know?
Well, they're kind of the Switzerland of it, aren't they? And just
Dr. Pepper?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're their own thing. They stay out of everybody's way. They make their own thing. They're successful.
Right, because they're owned by Keurig.
I don't even know if I knew that.
Yep.
Really?
Yep. For reasons I can't say on air, probably, I do know that Keurig and Dr. Pepper are part of the same company.
Okay. All right.
But anyways, though, I thought it would be fun to taste these drinks and just get some initial reactions. And I'm sure this will make some great audio.
Okay.
But first, I think we should toast to our dirty sodas.
Here it is. Oh my goodness. I'm telling you, I'm sure it has part to do with the fact I haven't had a soda in 35 days. I'm sure that's part of it. But it tastes great.
Yeah, I need to stir mine up quick.
It kind of tastes like a float, so you might not like it that much. The cream in there, the coconut cream, makes it taste like a float.
This isn't bad.
That's great. What are you talking? It's so good.
I don't know, what I was worried about, obviously. Well, so the whole thing with Dr. Pepper is they've got a million flavors, right? Inside of it.
Yeah. It's a bunch. It's like, it's not a flavor. It's a bunch of flavors. You know what I mean? It's Dr. Pepper.
Could you name the dominant flavor, though? Just because we have all these syrups in here, I don't know, like, if you had to say, like, what is the main flavor? Like, is it cherry, or is there just a lot of grenadine in mine?
I don't know what the main flavor is, which I think is probably a good thing. I think that means it's well made.
Sure. Yeah, like they're all
that I don't know what it is. Because it doesn't just taste like I'm drinking Dr. Pepper either.
Right.
Which you wouldn't know. But...
Well, sure. I thought, this kind of tastes like Coke, but not much.
For those who can't see, which is everyone, there's like a bunch of like foam on top of it, which is, I assume, from the cream and the soda reacting in some way. And it's basically like what you get on the top of a root beer float. I'm a fan. Sure. I'm going to have to go to one of these places.
Absolutely. So, in order to learn a little bit more about this and just in preparation for this episode, I got in contact with someone with a lot of experience with dirty sodas.
Okay.
So, Daniel is from Columbus, but he's a student out at BYU right now. And I think the most shocking revelation about this whole conversation I had with him is that he and his friends have never heard the term dirty soda.
They didn't know that's what it was called.
They had never heard the phrase dirty soda. So he was talking to his friends, and he said that he was talking to someone about this for a podcast and about dirty sodas, and all of his friends are like, what's that? And he says to them, the thing we drink all the time. So at least he does drink them, but just it seems like maybe not everyone is calling them that, and they refer more to the place that they're going, like, hey, you want to go to Swig later?
Sure.
As opposed to, hey, do you want to have a dirty soda?
Okay.
And Daniel's go-to drink is a Dr. Pepper. He prefers it with a shot of raspberry syrup and whipped cream on top.
Interesting. And
it seems like he and his friends aren't as loyal to like one specific place. And it seems like, obviously like soda is soda. And, most of the toppings and mix-ins and flavors are pretty similar. And it seems like the main differentiator is the food that comes along with it. That some of them have different types of snacks. Pink frosted sugar cookies are very common at these places.
Okay.
And, some places will have, I think I was on Fizz's site and they have like a churro donut, which sounds awesome. So I think it's more, they all have kind of that same base, variety of sodas, but then you're going to this place because it's got the cool donuts or whatever. So Daniel, I want to say thank you for answering all my questions about dirty soda and kind of clearing some things up for me. And I'm surprised that I'm kind of okay with drinking this, and I'm probably going to be heading out west later this year for vacation, and will most likely be going through St. George, Utah, which is where Swig is headquartered at. And I look forward to trying not just a dirty soda I made in my house, but hopefully a real one.
A real dirty soda.
Real dirty.
So a couple weeks ago, my wife and I were going to the store Ross. Have you ever been to a Ross?
Maybe once.
So it's like Marshall's or TJ Maxx, and where it's like clothing. It's not used clothing. It's not like a thrift store, but it has thrift store prices. It's like new clothes that were like from some brand. It's in the season before and it didn't sell very well, or maybe there's blemishes, or maybe there's some kind of product faults or something, right? So there's something wrong with it, but there's nothing wrong with it really, right? And so they have crazy prices. Ross being the one of these, if you're to make a tier list, it would go like Ross being the cheapest, then Marshalls, then TJ Maxx, right? That's kind of how it goes.
Which one is S tier in this scenario?
Well, in my opinion, that's going to be Ross. And when we left that store, we got a ton of stuff, okay? A ton of clothes. And Kirsten, my wife, said, I feel like this place kind of beat inflation somehow, right? Because there's still, you can go there today and buy a t-shirt for $4. That's like a thrift store price for a brand new t-shirt. Yeah. Oftentimes, name brand. This store has somehow figured out how to circumnavigate inflation in today's world. And that just reminded me of one other thing that for a very long period of time went around inflation. Coca-Cola. My favorite drink of all time, one of the best things you can have, the nectar of the gods, if you will, Coca-Cola, from 1899 to 1959 was 5 cents a bottle. For 60 years, you could buy a Coke for 5 cents. That's crazy, right? Because 5 cents in 1899 was a lot more money than 5 cents in 1959, which is, again, the case today, and there's a reason that it's still not that way, but it was that way for a very, very long time. And I found out some of the reasons that was the case, okay? And this was fascinating to me. So first, Coca-Cola was invented in the 1800s, the late 1800s, but like in the 1880s, I think, and its primary form of distribution was the soda fountain, right? So like in the old movies you watch and in the old days, they got soda fountains at drugstores and at gas stations and at restaurants. They have these where people go and they get Coke out of a soda fountain.
I think the guy who at the fountain, don't they call him a soda jerk?
They do call them jerks, yeah, which is, again, not something you say anymore. I'm not really sure why. It doesn't sound right now, I guess. Maybe that's why. But that's what they're called, yeah. And soda fountains were a lot more popular. They still have them in gas stations and stuff, but it wasn't like the attraction that it was, right? And so in the 1800s and the 1890s, a lawyer went to the CEO of Coca-Cola and asked, I think it was 2 lawyers technically, asked if they could buy the bottling rights for Coca-Cola, if they wanted to bottle and sell Coca-Cola, okay? And the CEO thought this was ridiculous because they sold all their Coke at fountains, and he considered that to be the way of the future, and it would never change, and he scoffed at it, but he said sure, and sold the bottling rights for Coca-Cola for $1. $1 that he didn't even end up collecting, man. Okay? He literally never even got the $1, but he thought it was such a ridiculous proposal that he was like, certainly, this is fine. Go ahead and do that. And so these people, these 2 lawyers, they started bottling Coca-Cola. And that contract that they signed, that was a legitimate contract, had no end date. And they decided they were going to sell it at 5 cents. And so Coca-Cola guaranteed them a price. And so they sold to these lawyers the bottling rights for that price, and that price had no end date. And so this is part of the reason why 5 cents is where it started, but it kept being 5 cents for years and years and years. And Coca-Cola didn't like this. The farther it went, right, the more money they could be making if all they could do is just incrementally increase the price, but they weren't allowed to. And the company wanted to keep, obviously, selling it at 5 cents because they were selling a ton. And Coca-Cola's only incentive to make money was to just figure out how they could possibly sell more.
I'm sure the polar bears liked it, though, right?
Of course they did. You've seen the videos, the commercials. They loved it. Everyone loved it. How could you not? If my memory serves me right, Pepsi was around 10 cents for a bottle. So Coca-Cola was undercutting the competition. So they were obviously selling a lot of soda. So this happened for years. Coca-Cola was sold at 5 cents. It was for actually a 6.5 ounce glass bottle, which is not something that you even see anymore. You don't see really glass bottles unless it's like a novelty thing. And 6.5 ounces is a super weird amount. But that's what it was for that many years, right? And so eventually, I think in like the 1920s, upper 1920s, they renegotiated their contract, and they were able to renegotiate on a bunch of different terms. But one of the things that didn't change was the price. And people are like wondering, why is the price not different? Well, there's a few reasons that's true. Number one, there's like 400 to 500,000 vending machines in the United States at this time. Coca-Cola owned like 80% of all vending machines, okay? And a vending machine, all of the infrastructure that they already owned was set up to receive 1 nickel. That is what it was created to do. We talked about vending machines last time, and so this is like the perfect example, right? Vending machines, these were created to only accept 5 cents. So they would have had to either retrofit all these things with new things to make more money. In fact, they went so far as to talk to the Treasury of the United States, and they asked if they could make a 7.5-cent piece specifically for people to buy Coke with.
No,
they
there's
did.
no way.
They literally asked for that because they were a big company, right? So they probably had a lot of like pull in politics and whatnot, right? But not enough to do that because the Treasury thought that was a ridiculous request.
Which president do you think would go on the 7.5-cent coin?
Not everyone's favorite. You know what I mean? Because that's a. Can you imagine if that was the case?
I'm thinking like a William Henry Harrison, one of these guys who was only in office for 3 months and died of a cold or whatever. Like, we don't want to give it to the sitting president because that might be an insult. So
right.
Yeah, give it to old Tippecanoe.
There's a president, and I'm gonna embarrass myself here, but we were driving around in Marion, Ohio, and there's like a presidential gravesite in Marion for a president I didn't even know was president. I actually don't even remember what the guy's name is.
I'm trying to remember because I almost went to that gravesite.
It's kind of cool. Like,
Yeah.
It's a cool looking thing, but I was like, presidential? And then we looked it up, and I was like...
Was it Hayes? I know Rutherford B.
I don't
Hayes.
think it's Hayes, because I know about... I think it was like...
Chester Arthur?
No.
Ooh, man, all my grade school history teachers are going to get on me
I know.
here.
I felt bad that I didn't know he was a president.
James Garfield?
No, it's...
William McKinley's in Canton, so it's not him. Yeah,
I
Marion,
need to look it up
Ohio.
because I embarrassed myself. Like, I had no clue. When I heard his name...
Oh, it's Warren G. Harding.
Harding.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a president. That doesn't even ring a bell to me.
Wait, what year? Do you know what year the 7.5-cent thing was?
I think it was in the 20s.
Oh boy, because I
Maybe
think
not.
he was the president in the 20s.
Really?
So maybe it should have been him.
Maybe he could have been on it.
Anyways, I've digressed enough.
I have to. I apologize. That was my fault. Coca-Cola even thought it important enough to ask the U.S. Treasury to make them a specific coin so that they could make more money, which was obviously declined. So that is one of the main reasons that didn't become a thing. And that's one of the main reasons that even though they renegotiated and had a chance to make more money, they didn't, because they would have had to spend a lot more money in the process to be making a lot more money. One strategy that they implemented on a very small scale, they were testing it, right? It was like a test market. They didn't do it everywhere. And this also sounds just as crazy to me, is every 10th bottle they would leave empty. So that one person out of 10 who tried to buy a Coke had to put in 2 nickels to get 1 Coke.
Whoa.
Which effectively raised the price to like 5.5 cents per bottle because they just shorted them 1, which seems like a ridiculously unethical practice to me.
Sure.
But also just like the fact that they were willing to do all of that just to figure out how to make more money, I understand, because they were probably losing potential money by selling it at 5 cents. I understand that. But I just couldn't believe that was how that worked. I can't believe also that there's a world in which something costs the same amount of money for that long. If you look up like inflation difference from 1899 to 1959, which I didn't do, I'm sure it's like huge.
Yeah, other than maybe the Costco hot dog, I feel like, this was probably the biggest one.
There is one more that comes to mind, though, that I also partake in relatively regularly. The 23-ounce can of Arizona tea has been 99 cents since 1995, and it's still to this day 99 cents.
I feel like these are all for like marketing and public relations goodwill, though.
It's mostly... So I looked up the tea one because that was when I was wondering about myself again, and it's been quoted by the guy that they're willing to make a lot less money than they could, specifically because he's quoted saying something like, people already have to pay more at the gas pump and at the grocery store. They don't need to pay more for their tea. So like he's just kind of in it to be the good guy, I guess.
Right.
So there's no story behind it. There's no explanation other than this company's willing to make less money to sell a product less for their consumer.
Right.
But that's one of the only other things I can think of, and that's not even as long. That's only 35 years or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I'm all for beverages staying cheap because unless I'm changing for good after this whole 30, which I don't know, only the time will tell, I'm a big fan of sugary drinks.
Thank you for listening to the Factoid Podcast. If you have a factoid and want to share it with us, email us at whatsyours@factoidpodcast.com. We also accept corrections because no factoid is good if it's incorrect.
You can find us on all the major podcast platforms, as well as on our website, factoidpodcast.com.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.